Take a look inside your wallet. There is a good chance you will find a Visa card, maybe several. Now ask yourself a simple question. Who actually gave you that card? Most people would say Visa, and they would be wrong. Your card was almost certainly issued by a bank. The bank lent you the money, the bank set your interest rate, the bank sends you the bill every month, and the bank keeps the profit when you pay it. If you never pay, the bank is the one that loses. So where exactly does Visa fit into any of this? And yet somehow, every single time money moves, Visa gets paid. You buy a coffee, Visa gets paid. You book a flight, Visa gets paid. You pay your electricity bill, order groceries, tap your card at a shop on the other side of the world, and each time, quietly, invisibly, Visa earns its fee. Millions of times an hour in almost every country on earth. Here is what makes that so strange. Visa does not lend you money. It does not decide whether you qualify for credit. It does not charge you interest. It does not even manufacture the physical card with its own name printed on it. It has managed to become one of the most profitable companies in the history of the world by carefully not doing almost everything you assume it does. It has become one of the most profitable businesses ever created, while avoiding almost every type of risk people assume it takes. So how is that possible? The easy answer is that Visa charges small fees on transactions. But that barely scratches the surface because plenty of companies charge fees and none of them built anything like this. The real answer is bigger and stranger than fees. At its heart, Visa sells something you would never guess from the logo on the plastic. It sells trust between strangers. And this is the fourth case file in our look at the invisible systems that quietly run the modern world. To understand what Visa really is, you have to go back to a time before it existed, when paying with a card was a genuine headache. In the 1950s and early 60s, most cards belonged to a single store. A department store issued its own card. A gas company issued another. Your favorite hotel had one, your airline had one, and each card worked only inside the business that made it. If you carried 5 cards in your pocket, you could shop in exactly 5 places. There was no shared system connecting banks, shops, and customers. Every company was its own little island. Then the bank spotted an opportunity. What if a customer could carry one bank card that worked in many different stores? They would spend more freely. Merchants would sell more. Banks would earn more. The idea was obvious. Making it work was not. Because the real obstacle was never printing the plastic. It was trust. Picture a customer walking into a restaurant. The restaurant's bank has never heard of the customer's bank. The customer's bank has never heard of the restaurant. And yet, in a matter of seconds, both institutions have to agree to trust a total stranger. Who verifies the card? Who approves the purchase? Who guarantees the restaurant actually gets paid? Without a shared system, every single transaction became a fragile negotiation between parties who had never met. The first real attempt to crack this came in 1958 when Bank of America launched a card in California called BankAmericard, designed to be accepted by many different merchants instead of just one. The launch was bold, and it was a mess. The bank mailed thousands of unsolicited cards straight to people's homes. Fraud exploded. Defaults piled up. For many companies, that chaos would have been the end. Instead, it was the beginning of something far bigger, because Bank of America slowly realized that the real prize was not issuing every card itself. The real prize was letting other banks join the same system. Through the 1960s, banks all across the country began signing on. Each one could issue cards to its own customers and sign up shops in its own town, but every single one of them had to follow the same rulebook. The same procedures for approving a purchase, the same security standards, the same way of settling the money afterward. And here the business quietly transformed. It stopped being about selling cards and started being about creating a common language that thousands of competing banks could all speak. In 1970, Bank of America handed control of the whole system over to the member banks themselves. forming a new organization owned by its participants, an arrangement shaped largely by a banker named D. Hock. And in 1976, that organization gave itself a new name, one that belonged to no single country and no single bank. Short, simple, and recognizable in dozens of languages. Visa, a word that suggested travel, access, movement, not a card, a passport into a global system. By that point, the physical card had already become the least important part of the whole thing. Anyone could print plastic, anyone could install a payment terminal. The hard part, the truly valuable part, was the invisible web of agreements that let thousands of rival banks trust one another and run their transactions through one shared network. Visa had quietly become something the financial world had never seen. Not a bank, not a lender, not a manufacturer, a network. And that single distinction explains almost everything the company would become. Which brings us to what Visa actually does in those 2 seconds when you tap your card. Because it is not what most people think. The first surprise is that Visa usually does not move your money at all. When you buy that coffee, the cash does not flow out of your account because Visa is holding it or carrying it. It moves because your bank and the shop's bank agree to settle up later, according to Visa's shared rules. What Visa provides is the network that lets those two institutions talk to each other safely, instantly, and in a language they both understand. Think of it less like a bank and more like the operating system running underneath global payments. In the same way the internet lets computers made by totally different companies communicate through shared protocols, Visa lets thousands of independent financial institutions communicate through one shared financial protocol. Without it, every bank would have to strike a separate deal with every other bank, and the number of connections would spiral into the impossible. Now watch what really happens in those 2 effortless seconds. You tap the terminal. It sends a request to the shop's bank. That request enters Visa's network, which instantly identifies which bank issued your card and routes the message to it. Your bank checks in a fraction of a second whether the card is real, whether the account is active, whether you have the money, and whether the purchase looks suspicious. Then the answer races back through the same network. Approved. The terminal beeps and you walk away. The money itself does not actually change hands until later in a separate settlement process between the banks. Visa's job was never to hold the cash. Its job was to make sure the right information reached the right place, in the right format, with near-perfect reliability, in the blink of an eye. That is the quiet trick at the center of the whole business. Customers think they are watching money move. What is really moving is information. Every purchase is a tiny conversation between 2 institutions. One asks, "Can this person pay?" The other answers, "Yes." And Visa makes absolutely sure both sides understand each other correctly millions of times every hour, across more than 200 countries and in more than 150 currencies. Its network, called VisaNet, is built to handle more than 65,000 transactions every second. And in a single recent year, it processed an average of around 900 million transactions a day. Almost no one ever thinks about VisaNet. People simply expect their card to work. And that expectation, that quiet, total confidence, is one of the most valuable things Visa has ever built. Because reliability creates trust, and trust changes how people behave. When customers believe their card will always work, they stop carrying cash. When merchants trust that an approval is good, they hand over the goods without hesitation. When banks trust the network, they issue more cards. Every successful tap quietly makes everyone a little more confident in the next one. Over time, Visa's role evolved beyond transaction processing. What it ultimately provides is certainty. The certainty that a payment started in one country can be understood, verified, and completed almost anywhere else on the planet. And this is where the business turns from clever into almost unbeatable, because of a force economists call the network effect. The idea is simple. Some things become more valuable the more people use them. A single telephone is useless. A telephone network connecting millions is indispensable. Visa runs on exactly this logic. A card accepted at one shop is worthless. A card accepted almost everywhere is something else entirely. Every new merchant that accepts Visa makes the card more useful to customers. Every new customer carrying a Visa makes acceptance more valuable to merchants. And all of those customers and merchants together make it more attractive for banks to issue the cards in the first place, which puts even more cards into circulation, which pulls in even more merchants. Round and round it goes, each participant strengthening the whole for everyone else. Visa's growth does not just add revenue, it adds value to the entire network. There is a beautiful piece of mathematics underneath this. If every bank had to wire itself directly to every other bank, the number of connections needed would explode as the system grew, quickly becoming unmanageable. But with Visa in the middle, each institution connects just once to the network. The network swallows all the complexity and everyone else gets simplicity. One connection replaces millions of possible ones. That is why Visa becomes more powerful the larger it gets, and why the millionth customer makes it far more valuable than the first. And once a network reaches that kind of scale, something remarkable happens. Joining it becomes far easier than fighting it. Imagine trying to launch a brand new payment network tomorrow. You would need customers, but customers will not carry your card unless merchants accept it. Merchants will not accept it unless customers already use it. Banks will not issue it unless merchants take it. Everyone stands frozen, waiting for someone else to move first. It is a trap, and Visa escaped it decades ago. Today, every new participant simply plugs into a system that already works, and leaving that system is far harder than joining it, not because anyone charges you a fee to go, but because replacing it would require thousands of banks, millions of merchants, every payment processor, and billions of customers to all abandon it and switch to something new at the same moment. You are not asking them to swap a card. You are asking them to abandon a language the entire financial world already speaks fluently. That is why so many of the flashy financial companies of recent years, the digital wallets, the buy now, pay later apps, the slick payment startups, mostly did not try to replace Visa. They built on top of it. The customer sees a shiny new app. Underneath, in a great many cases, the same old network is still quietly doing the work. And that is the strange nature of powerful infrastructure. The better it works, the more invisible it becomes. You remember the app you opened, the shop you visited, the bank you used? Almost no one remembers the network that silently connected them all. Visa succeeds precisely because it disappears. So if this network is so dominant, the obvious question is why no one has simply built a bigger one. Part of the answer is that cold start trap we just described, the near impossible task of getting everyone to move at once. But there is another part of the answer, and honesty requires that we look at it squarely. Because all of this power comes at a price, and that price is paid quietly by almost everyone. That small FEE on every transaction has a name. Interchange, often called the swipe fee. On every purchase you make, a slice, often somewhere between 1% and 3%, is skimmed off and divided among the banks and networks that made the payment happen. You rarely see it because merchants build it into their prices, which means all of us pay for it in the cost of nearly everything we buy. Multiply a couple of percent across $17 trillion of spending, and you begin to understand those 50% profit margins. To Visa and the banks, those fees are the fair price of a fast, secure, fraud-protected system that also funds your cash back and travel points. To many merchants, they are an unavoidable tax on doing business, levied by a network they cannot afford to refuse. That tension has produced decades of lawsuits, government antitrust action, proposed caps on the fees, and new laws aimed at forcing more competition. Because Visa has grown so large in many major markets, regulators around the world have repeatedly examined its pricing practices, competitive position, and market power. The invisible empire is astonishingly useful. It is also, unavoidably, a toll booth sitting on top of the modern economy, and reasonable people genuinely disagree about whether that toll is fair. Both things are true at once, and that is the honest picture. Visa built something genuinely miraculous, a system that lets strangers on opposite sides of the planet trust each other in 2 seconds. And it used that system to place itself in the middle of nearly every purchase humanity makes, in a position that is extraordinarily difficult to challenge or escape. Which points to the deeper lesson hiding inside your wallet, one that reaches far beyond payments. Look closely at many of the most valuable companies ever built, and you find the same quiet pattern. They start out appearing to sell a product, but the ones that truly endure eventually stop competing over products at all. Instead, they become the system that everyone else depends on. And that is a fundamentally different kind of power. A product can be copied, a factory can be rebuilt, a price can be undercut, but a system that thousands of institutions have woven themselves into is almost impossible to pull out and replace. Railroads became powerful because whole cities depended on their tracks. Operating systems became powerful because every developer wrote software for them. Marketplaces became powerful because that is where the buyers and sellers already were. And payment networks became powerful because the banks and the shops all learned to speak the same language. In every one of those cases, the system quietly became worth more than any single product moving through it. This is why infrastructure, when you can build it, is one of the strongest positions in all of business. Visa does not have to guess which shop, which airline, or which website will be the next big success. It simply takes a tiny share every time any of them makes a sale. It does not compete with the economy. It quietly grows alongside all of it. Rather than trying to own every business, Visa became the thing connecting almost all of them. What Visa really did, in the end, was take something we normally think of as warm and personal, the trust between two people, and turn it into cold, reliable, industrial infrastructure. Trust that no longer lives between individuals, but hums between thousands of institutions that will never once meet. It industrialized trust, and perhaps that is the greatest irony of the whole story. The companies shaping our daily lives most deeply are so often the ones we notice the least. We celebrate the phone we bought in the shop we love, and we never spare a thought for the silent network that made every one of those purchases possible. Yet switch that network off for even a day, and modern commerce would begin to grind to a halt within hours. Because money, it turns out, does not really make the economy move. Trust does. Money only moves after trust has already gone first. If this way of seeing the world stays with you, taking the ordinary things we move through every day and turning them over to find the machinery underneath, then consider subscribing and staying with us. There are a great many invisible empires out there quietly shaping the choices you believe you are making all on your own. Case file number 4, closed.